Alrighty, Rob, we're going to be moving to your favorite team, moving to the Arlington Renegades. There is actually four quarterbacks, I believe, on your roster at the moment. I'm sure one will probably be cut or whatnot, but very interesting dynamic. We have Luis Perez, we have Lindsey Scott, we have Drew Plitt, and we have Nolan Ahlers. Four quarterbacks in their room. What can you tell us about these guys, Rob? Who do you think is going to be day one starter? And is there any quarterback controversy in Arlington?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And this is one of the rare times where the quarterback controversy isn't because you have a lot of bad quarterbacks, it's because you have a lot of really good quarterbacks. Luis Perez is a legend of spring league football who's had success in the XFL and the USFL. And last year, he led the Renegades in the playoffs to a championship victory. He is a great quarterback, great leader. He has a pretty accurate arm. He's sometimes prone to turning the ball over in bad situations. But it seemed like last year, especially in the playoffs, he really cut down on that. And I think overall, he probably should be just narrowly the favorite to be the starter for the Renegades this year. The Renegades also had the first overall pick in the UFL draft, and they picked Lindsey Scott, the quarterback, who's a young guy out of Incarnate Word who had a lot of success in college before injuries kind of derailed his career. And he kind of bounced back at Incarnate Word, where he seemed pretty dominant. So he was coveted by a lot of these spring football teams. He was the number one pick in the USFL draft, or number two pick actually in the USFL draft last year before the USFL, was dissolved. So he absolutely has some very high status in terms of spring football. It's kind of a mystery why the Renegades drafted him when they already had a solidified starter in Luis Perez. One of the theories I've seen getting tossed around is that the Renegades drafted him only to turn around and trade him because they might be able to get more in value for him than what they used when they picked him. But if they don't trade him, that will be very interesting because Lindsey Scott is a young, exciting talent. And if Luis Perez goes out there and struggles in the first game at all, I think if Lindsey Scott is still on the roster, it would not be long before he gets on the field, assuming Luis Perez starts to struggle. But if Luis Perez goes out there and just completely balls out, then I think you would definitely see Lindsey Scott get traded at some point during the season. Um, that would definitely be the main quarterback controversy right there between Lindsey Scott and Luis Perez. They also have Drew Plitt, who was their starter last year. He was not great. It's part of why the Renegades traded for Luis Perez in the middle of the season last year. He did win some games. He beat the Vegas Vipers in the season opener. But he's probably not viable as the first quarterback on that team, especially with Luis Perez and Lindsey Scott. The fourth guy, he's 24, I think, so he's pretty young. He's also kind of just right out of college where he was pretty successful. He didn't have as much success as Lindsey Scott. He wasn't as notable, I would say, as Lindsey Scott. So I don't think he will be much competition, at least for the starting quarterback position. But in the eventuality Lindsey Scott gets traded, I could definitely see him competing for that backup quarterback spot with Drew Plitt and winning it over him. So Luis Perez, for now, I would say should be the favorite to be the starter, but I will mention he's not technically on the team as of right now, I don't think, because he hasn't signed a contract to play for them this year, even though they own his rights in the Spring Football League. And it is expected that he will sign that contract and be back on the Renegades roster at some point this season. But I mean, maybe there's some sort of negotiation going on between Luis Perez and the Renegades, waiting to see if they're going to actually trade Lindsey Scott so he knows he's going to be the starter when he goes back. It could be really any number of things. There really hasn't been a lot of news on what's going on there. As far as we can tell, there's been nothing released by any of the teams. For as far as we know, Luis Perez is still on the team and will likely be the starter heading into week one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know unless Luis Perez goes someplace else. I don't know why you would not start the guy that brought you a championship in the XFL. I think that he will be the day one starter. And I think that it's important for him to be the day one starter. Not only just, not even just talking about the publicity of the game, in terms of, the both champions with the Birmingham Stallions and the Renegades playing each other. I think the likelihood of Luis Perez starting in that game is actually pretty high. But of course, even in terms of playability, it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be battling it out between Lindsey Scott and Luis Perez. Luis Perez, of course, has had much more experience in the spring football league. Lindsey Scott has not. So it'll be very interesting, of course, because Lindsey Scott was a high draft prospect. But, even as we talk about draft prospects in the NFL, it could be a 50-50 shot in terms of their even success rate in being a franchise guy that can lead the team forward or not. And Luis Perez is that guaranteed guy that has already done it. So, yeah, I would definitely put my money on Luis Perez, and I'm sure that he'll be coming back. I'm sure it's just a matter of time, especially with the news of A.J. McCarron signing with the Battle Hawks and Jordan Ta'amu coming back. Luis Perez, we should probably be hearing pretty soon in regards to him
Yeah,
signing up for next season. So that should be good. Thank you for joining us on the Redzone Rodeo podcast.
if you like football and you like having fun, come on down and subscribe and check out our channel for more videos like this one.
No ifs, ands, or buts. This is the best place for your football news.